into the war, and where I think that they probably should not have. But back to the weapons of mass destruction. The administration made the case that Saddam Hussein was a nuclear threat. Every senator who voted for the war resolution will now tell you that they voted for the resolution because they were persuaded by the seriousness of the nuclear threat. Now that threat was based on three factoids. One, Saddam Hussein had imported aluminum tubes that could only be used for centrifuges to enrich uranium. Was a conclusion. Except, in fact, if you talk to anybody, they will tell you that, among other things, the tubes were the wrong size, the wrong thickness, the wrong dimensions, and oh, by the way, they were anodized. And so the first thing you would have to do, if you wanted to use them as centrifuges, in addition to cutting them at the right size, is you would have to remove the anodization because you cannot enrich uranium in anodized tubes. Now, I remember arguing with Valerie about this, because she actually went out there to talk about and saw the tubes. And I said, I don't believe it. I said, the wrong sizes. These are precision instruments. They require precision dimensioning. The Iraqis are incapable of that. But they probably gold-plated some. They were probably sold online some very expensive tubes for, as it turned out, rockets that they were reverse engineering. So that's the first case. And any rocket scientist could have told you this. Because I had rocket scientists who were telling me this all the time. The second one was that Saddam Hussein had tried to import uranium yellowcake from Africa. I knew something about that because I'm the one who had gone out to check out this claim that surfaced in the President State of the Union address. Yellowcake uranium. And the third factoid was that Saddam Hussein would only need a grapefruit-sized amount of uranium yellowcake to make a nuclear weapon. So you had raw material, centrifuges, the volume that he needed, and what you conclude out of all of that. Well, the conclusion was articulated by Connie Rice and Don Rumsfeld and everybody in the administration. We could not afford to wait for the smoking gun to come in the form of mushroom cloud. How many times did you hear that during the debate? Oh, everybody said it. The problem was none of it was true. In February 2002, I had gone to Niger, and I had investigated the claim at the request of the CIA in response to a question posed to the CIA by the Vice President's office. I came back, I reported my findings, nothing unusual in this. The Vice President asks a question, you go out and you try and answer the question, and you get the question answered and the answer back to the Vice President. So when the Vice President says, I never heard anything about this, well, either he's lying, or else his people deserve to be fired. That's not a Joe Wilson problem, that he didn't hear and get the answer. It is a problem that's either a staff problem, or it's a memory problem for the Vice President. In fact, they did know it. In fact, they knew it because they tried to make this assertion that Saddam Hussein had attempted to purchase yellowcake uranium from Africa in a speech in September of 2002, and the CIA said, don't. Don't do it. It's not true. So the way they got around it for the President's State of the Union address was by saying, okay, there is a British report that's unclassified that says that he tried to import uranium from West Africa. So rather than make the assertion, rather than have the President make the assertion of the Congress, why don't we just have the President quote the British report? And somebody at the CIA, a fellow by the name of Alan Foley, said, okay, that works for us. Even though we know it's not true. It works for us to have you, have the President, say to the American people and the Congress of the United States that the British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa. The infamous 16 words. It's okay to have the President knowingly tell a lie by couching it as somebody else's information. Now, I know a lot about Niger. There's no British embassy there. There's no British intelligence there. They don't have any intelligence collecting capability there. The French do. And the French actually went and checked out this at our request as well, my suggestion, and came back with exactly the same conclusions as they later told me. And yet this goes into the President's State of the Union address. When I learned, and I'm going to be brief here, when I learned that the country to which the President was referring and the case to which he was referring was the one that I had investigated, I did what I think any citizen should do. I asserted my rights under the First Amendment of the Constitution to petition my government for the redress of a grievance. That is the last of the operating clauses in the First Amendment to the Constitution. I approached my government, I approached the White House through Brent Scowcroft, I approached the Secretary of State through the Undersecretary. I went up and was in closed session with the House Intelligence Committee and the Senate Select Intelligence Committee. And I told them my story. And this begs the question, really, of holding your government to account for what your government has done and said in the name of the people. In those days, nobody was saying we were told a bunch of lies. We were lied into a war. Now it's hard to get anybody to talk about that war without beginning the conversation by saying we were lied into a war of choice, or we were given false intelligence. When I discovered that it was Niger that the President was talking about, I approached my government. I was finally told by somebody at the State Department, you know, if you want the government to act, you probably didn't have to write the story and get it published. So I did. I wrote a story for the New York Times, a little opinion piece. It was called What I Didn't Find in Africa. There are a lot of people who come up to me and tell me they remember precisely where they were when they read the article and their initial emotions. I find that hard to believe because it was July 6th and everybody was at the beach. The article came out on July 6th and it came out on the President's birthday, President Bush's birthday. So we have that in common. We celebrate his birthday in our own way. A week later, after the administration had come out publicly in response to my article, they had come out and they said that 16 words did not rise to the level of inclusion in the State of the Union address. Now that should have been a signal to the Washington press corps, well, maybe we should investigate how did it get in the present State of the Union address. And the administration understood that, and so they tried to change the subject. And so they changed the subject from their lies to this guy Wilson and his wife. Well, I knew that they would come after me. So I got out all my George H.W. Bush memorabilia, walking with him on the eve of the first Gulf War in the Rose Garden, just the two of us, handwritten notes from him congratulating me on my courage and bravery and management of the situation. And I figured I would weather the 2-day storm. What I did not figure was that what these guys were going to do in order to get the stories changed, the storyline changed, is they were going to betray the identity of a covert CIA officer, which in most countries is called treason when you do that. In our country, it's apparently called fair game. This was unprecedented. Very rarely do you see families dragged in to political debates, particularly families of people who are not politicians. So this idea that they would do this was a particularly nasty low blow. And they succeeded. For several months, people talked more about Wilson and his wife, and they talked about the President's lies to the country about weapons of mass destruction and war.